Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here today with you guys in the Meet Me in the Metaverse workroom. So I think we're all here today to talk about customer engagement and kind of the role that Web3 is playing in changing the way that brands engage with customers, opening up this whole new world of opportunity in how brands think about the customer journey. And as part of that, and as we enter kind of this new era that we're calling the era of virtualization, brands are also facing a lot of new challenges around how they think about data collection, how they maintain that single source of truth around who their customer is, and really starting to think about bridging that gap between Web 2 and Web 3 to understand what's happening across the entire customer experience. So really excited to talk to both of you all today some more about that. And with that, maybe I'll pass it off to you guys to introduce yourself. So Avanthika, why don't you go first?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Ashley. And hi, everyone. My name's Avantika. I'm a product manager at Salesforce, spearheading our Web3 initiatives through our emerging tech and products team. So, for the past year, I've been really involved with my team on launching a new product suite called NFT Cloud, which I'm super excited to share a bit more about today. And aside from building our product, I really enjoy advising brands on their Web3 strategy, helping them pilot our product, supporting their implementations, and ultimately helping enterprise brands go live with their NFT projects. With that, I'll pass it over to Jordan.
Hi, everybody. I am Jordan Cuddy. I am Chief Client Officer at Jam3. I lead more or less our clients through their customer experience. And as you can imagine, Web3 is a huge touch point for them these days that they're thinking about. So I'm pretty excited to kind of share a little bit about what brands are thinking with respect to Web3 and their data foundation as they enter the metaverse and the Web3 world. So pretty excited to be here.
Awesome. Great. And hi, everyone. My name is Ashley. I'm going to be our host for today. So I'm going to kick it off with our first question around how does customer engagement change in Web3? Which challenges are the same as they are in the current digital era, and which new ones are going to start to emerge?
Yeah, I guess I'll start off by saying, there's a huge identity crisis today. Forget about Web3 for just a second, right? There's already a problem where every individual has countless unique identities across their devices, all their personal data, like emails, phone numbers, and social media. That's already a lot of data to consolidate, which makes it so hard to understand who an individual is at any moment to create that personalized experience. Now, this only gets harder in Web3 because we're adding more identities. There's new customer touchpoints in Web3 through new engagement channels, which means there's new data, right? Like a wallet address, a Discord ID, a Telegram username, a PFP token ID, and all these additional data points, they only serve to exacerbate that identity crisis. So that's why in the market, we're seeing a whole new era of Web3 CRMs coming up in the market. And they're trying to help manage all these different identities. So at Salesforce, obviously being a leader in the CRM space, we're also investing a lot into this and building a solution that helps connect Web 2 and Web 3 data points within our CRM to better capture that full 360 view of the customer. Now, one thing I just want to mention is that, all the same elements of privacy and consent that were required in Web 2 engagements, they still carry over to Web 3. And in fact, Web 3 is a little bit more privacy centric than Web 2. So even if you are bridging Web 3 and Web 2 data to bring all these identifiers about a consumer together, it's really important to make sure the user opts in and provides the consent to be able to merge those identities.
That's super cool. I feel like we're having a conversation where you're going to be talking back end and I'm like the front end if we're talking like developer speak.
Yeah.
Right.
Because when I think about like the behaviors, I was just recently talking to a peer and she was talking about how tech has this progression. It's first a toy and then it's a tool and then it's technology. And so I kind of feel like with respect to Web3, we're really kind of still in this toy phase inching towards the tool phase. I think you all are at Salesforce are a total enabler to getting us to the tool phase. But like consumers and brands, they're dipping into Web3 without very much experience, but hopefully without very much expectation, I'd say. Because I think like once we get this adoption going on, and I think Salesforce will enable adoption through their technology with brands because they're a trusted risk mitigated source that people have been using for ages. So I think that's really helpful to get us towards the tool phase, because you're talking about new data, but we're also talking about very traditional behaviors, if you will, Discord, communication, wallets, payments. So I don't think those behaviors will change. I think it's the mechanics in which we use to exercise those behaviors. And then once we're in there, once brands are spending more time in Web3, I think new behaviors will emerge that actually make this a technology versus a toy versus a tool. So I think Salesforce enabling adoption is the first step in building this foundation.
Yeah, totally. And I think like kind of on the same path of enabling adoption, one thing that's really important as brands think about adoption is also long-term value and making sure that there's actually utility in these Web3 activations that they're building. So I guess how do you think about that, or how do you advise brands on how they make this something that is valuable long-term and helps create actual meaning for their customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm billed here as a subject matter expert, but I am not a subject matter expert. I'm a total hopeful believer and skeptic, and that's usually where I come from when I'm working with and advising brands, because they have to go at it the same way, right? They have to be very purposeful and authentic with their step into it. And I can lend a little bit of an example, because we recently launched Adidas's first step into the metaverse. And the whole goal here was, one, to align the brand with digital innovation. We wanted those two things to be synonymous. We also always have the job of releasing a hype new sneaker and driving conversion. So it worked out because the Oswego shoe collection is super futuristic, and, here we are talking as avatars. So, aligning that to the metaverse really made a lot of sense. But what our strategy team found was that there was a bit of a shift earlier this year from where can I go in the metaverse to who can I be in the metaverse? And we really wanted to take that insight and kind of like hang our whole creative campaign on it. So we wanted to make sure that there was an affordable way to show up uniquely as a unique avatar in the metaverse, because the solutions that were out there were not affordable if you wanted to have a unique avatar, or they were affordable but they were out of the box, like our beautiful haircuts. We all went to the same place. um, so what it led us to was to create the first ever unique avatar creator based on personality and style. And this unique avatar also hooked into Ready Player Me, so that you could travel within the walled gardens of the metaverse as this avatar that's very uniquely you, and nobody else in the world has that same look, and it's free. And that was really, really cool. So for Adi, this was really authentic, because it made perfect sense, because they are a creator brand, and they doubled down on their ability to have self-expression through fashion with this campaign. For them, this was a total investment in innovation. And if we're talking about foundational data, well, it was the very cornerstone of it that's going to be guiding their strategies in Web3 in 2023.
I think, more broadly, I think brands need to realize that the NFT drop is just the beginning of this whole process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dropping, selling an NFT, that's actually become the easy part. So many technologies today, they've made the whole process of creating a collection, minting, putting that on your site super simple. I think the hard part is creating the customer experience around it and actually delivering on the value like Adidas did, which leads me to my next point, that customer experience really has to be at the forefront, just like it is with any other product that brand sells. What a brand is selling is really a product, right? No matter if it's physical or digital, they still have to support this product just as they support other
Mm-hmm.
products. You don't want them delivering an experience that's disconnected from their other traditional channels. In fact, customers could get frustrated that brands are not recognizing through their communications that this person has been interacting with them through Web3 and Web2. So they really need to acknowledge the fact that the touch points they had with the customers, both in Web2 and Web3 channels, and build that engaging experience. And to my last point, to really do that, you need to be able to combine all these omni-channel experiences to ensure that these experiences are truly connected. So,
Yeah.
one thing I just want to mention is this is a continuous effort. Just like social, where you have a 24/7 staff who's dedicated to marketing and managing that social media presence, the Web3 efforts have to be seen from that same lens, right? If you just drop something and don't engage with that community, never update that utility roadmap, you risk ending up with negative will, negative PR. People are going to think that you're doing it purely for
Mm-hmm.
the hype and the revenue, which that's exactly the kind of images that brands don't want. And bouncing back from that will be pretty difficult.
Just curious, with your experience with talking to customers and clients, what's their biggest concern or worry that you have to get around?
I think we're seeing a lot of excitement and there's definitely a lot of unknowns, but I think a lot of brands come to us saying, "What does it actually take to do this project?" Right? I'm like, "Wow,
Mm-hmm.
you've done whole, marketing initiatives. I'm sure you've launched projects before, but it's really surprising to see brands coming to us for guidance on how to actually launch a Web3 marketing initiative and how does
Mm-hmm.
that change?" And I'm like, "You still have to start from the beginning, right? Like analyze your ideal customer profile, figure out what you want to deliver to this audience, who that audience is, and then make sure you're creating experience that's really catered to them and make sure you have all the resources and alignment in place." So I think it's just having that same mindset as you had in Web
Mm-hmm.
2 to support this is super important. It's not just like a test project that you can just,
Right.
try out with a limited lifetime. Like things live on the blockchain forever. So you need to
Forever.
think
Yeah.
about this as like, a permanent effort that you need to be able to staff and support.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like all the points you're making are super important and brings up another thing that brands should be thinking about in terms of decisions around platforms that they use to activate. A lot of times it seems like the teams who are thinking through and controlling kind of these Web3 activations might not be as integrated with the teams who have done the social and the paid media and all the other things that are happening on Web 2, and making sure that those teams are working together and deciding on platforms in a way that considers the existing foundation and considers kind of how those things are going to come together in the long term. How do you advise brands on that and thinking through platforms and existing tech, and like what are some of the things that they're maybe not accounting for in that process?
Well, I think you nailed it, Avantika. Don't do it for the hype. Like, don't do it for the sake of being in tech. I can remember, 5 years ago when AR was a thing. Oh, we got to do something in AR. We got to do something in AR. Well, does it make sense for your audience? Does it make sense for your brand? And then when you do it, is it utility? Is it just for the sake of the creative? And really just stress testing their need to be in the space versus solving a problem with the technology. And I think ultimately that's what we are always trying to advise our clients. And then when you talk about platform, it's tough because sometimes platforms are willing to spend money to have brands in the platform. And so as an agency, and we're trying to help them understand, but if you build your own thing, you own everything. You own all of the data and all of those interactions and the profiles, and then you can choose what you do with that. Ultimately, we want that to feel transparent to the folks that are sharing their data with you, making sure to close that loop.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned owning your data, right? Like making sure that you're not only putting data out there, but you're able to get back that data, own it, and like actually action on it, right?
Mhm.
I think earlier I spoke about the identity crisis and the whole swath of new Web3 data points to account for. Well, these new Web3 data sources are entirely new data structures that traditional systems were actually not designed to capture. So it's super critical for the platform you choose to be able to ingest this new type of data and seamlessly connect it back to your existing Web2 data. So in terms of platform you choose, you need to make sure both has the ability to ingest the data, integrate into your existing data architecture, and also integrate with other apps and tools in your existing product suite. And I will say that, you know, overall, there's no provider that's going to provide everything you need, especially for enterprise use cases. So one tool will generally not be enough. So that's why the integration is super important across all your tools and practices.
Yeah, totally. And since Avantika, you were so involved in the creation of Salesforce entering the space and NFT Cloud and Web3 CRM, how did you guys think about building out this product and how kind of data became a piece of that puzzle?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, first I want to mention before I dive into the product, as Salesforce, we're really focused on building the largest enterprise Web3 ecosystem. Web3 is all about solutions. And, I mentioned earlier, there's no solution that's going to give you everything you need and target every use case. So we're trying to make our solution super plug and play and composable. And we want our partners in the Web3 ecosystem to be able to integrate with our solution and kind of, fill in the gaps in our product, which customers have a need to fill, and identify the best of breed partners in our ecosystem who can actually fill that gap. So now diving into more detail about our product, one piece of our product is the ability to offer the full end-to-end experience of using a no-code interface to create NFTs, manage the metadata in Salesforce, deploy your smart contracts, and basically create a white label site for users to mint NFTs. So, it's a very simple no-code experience. We really care about the usability for brands and making it easy to adopt. Now, this process is, this is where you're actually putting your data into the blockchain, right? But as I said, it's equivalently important to be able to own that data and actually bring back that data from the chain into your own system. So that's where the real value is. And we built systems to consistently pull the blockchain, keep the data in your CRM up to date with what's happening on chain. And that helps you connect that blockchain data back to your CRM, automate on that data to better serve your customers. And you can, connect it to your existing tools like marketing to them, servicing to them, managing and tracking utility and loyalty programs, and really delivering on that long-term value and providing that connected experience. So overall, as Salesforce, we're not only trying to offer the ability to sell NFTs, but the ability to leverage our platform to manage and push the data on chain and bring back that data from the blockchain and automate on that.
Yeah. And I think something we touched on right at the beginning was also thinking through like privacy and consent. And as you're collecting all this data from users, it's going to be important that we're getting their consent to collect this data and bringing it in a thoughtful way. So a big part of that is going to be building trust with consumers and creating that trust so that they're willing to provide that data. So how do we get people to trust brands in Web3?
Yeah, trust is huge in Web3, right? And I think, there's this blanket statement right now that no one wants their data tracked and always wants to be anonymous. But I think in reality, if brands show that they're delivering on the value they promise, I think people will be progressively more inclined to share more data because they're seeing the value exchange that's derived from it. So brands just have to be really transparent about one, the data that they're collecting, how they're going to use that data, and deliver on the value that they're promising with that data. And I think once people realize that additional value, they're happy to give you more data. And I think it's all about that two-way value exchange. The more data users give a brand, the more the brand is actually able to give back to the user. So people will opt in more and more to provide that access. I think what's interesting is even when we had our first customer go live with, NFT Cloud, they were willing to share their data and their emails and, one to claim utility, but also to show the brand that, hey, I was a part of your Web2 loyalty program, and here I am supporting you as you get into this new era of Web3, and I'm happy to provide my email and show you that I'm still here with you through this journey. So I thought that was super cool that like over 70% of users were willing to provide additional information because they really trusted that brand and made sure that they were known to provide that utility for them.
That's incredible. I think as a creative agency, we are tasked often with figuring out what that value that they're going to provide is in exchange for data and information. And the more we can make it worth their while to not be anonymous and link essentially their Web 2 and Web 3 data, the more the brand has really at stake to over deliver on that. You also touched on the co-creation aspect of everything. And just to storytell a little bit, we did a project these last 3 years on an annual basis for Complex called Complex Land. Complex Con is coming up in November, and that's been going on for about 5 years. Just to digress and give context to everybody, it's what I would call the Super Bowl for sneakerheads. It joins culture and entertainment and music and fashion all in one place where brands show up, and they show up big to drop new product and storytell around their brand. That was a huge revenue earner for Complex. So when the pandemic hit and they realized that the activation in Long Beach in 2020 was no longer going to happen, we were already kind of conversing with them around bringing this digitally and like pairing it up at the same time as a physical event. And they were already starting to think and tease what their first step might be into the metaverse. And this is 2020. So we didn't even really understand or realize what the behaviors might be in the metaverse. But in 2020, we built this kind of out of necessity as a revenue stream for Complex, and it included customized avatars that were modeled for DE and I, which I thought was a really cool step towards inclusivity. And then it was pretty much an anonymous take on shopping in the metaverse. And it was very much digital exchange for physical goods. And it ran for like 3 days. But the next thing that happened was that we talked to power users. We did social listening. We talked to potential audiences in the future. And that was a really awesome thing that Complex did and had us do, because that allowed us to actually co-create with the people that wanted to participate and wanted to be, you know, loyal to the brand, so to speak. And they were all basically saying, we want multiplayer. We want to go to this event with our friends. We're in 2021, year two of this pandemic. We want to be able to take a selfie with our avatars together in front of this monument that, you know, Adidas had built or something. And the second thing that they wanted was gamification, because it's a pretty typical behavior to have in this space. So we added that. And so that's a really great example of value exchange for time spent with Complex. And then in year three, we kind of doubled down on the listening, and they were like, we want security, because we had bots infiltrating in 2021. And the other thing that I really love that they did was essentially give the ability for artists to mint and then sell their own NFTs. So I thought that was really also thoughtful to give the consumers a platform and a space to be creative. And then also the process of minting and transacting their own stuff that they then got paid for. So going back to just building trust, to your point, Avanthika, like deliver on the promise then.
Totally. Yeah.
Awesome. And I feel like you guys kind of touched on this in both of your responses, but I think also thinking about activating responsibly and making sure that ethics are part of everything you do. Jordan, I think in the stories that you talked through, like that was also a really critical component. But I guess any additional thoughts on just how brands activate responsibly and make sure ethics is part of what they're doing?
Yeah, I think, activating responsibility, one, definitely delivering on the value that you promise to your consumers, but ethics here is really paramount, right? Making sure you are getting consent to use public data that's on chain. Just because data is publicly available on the blockchain doesn't necessarily mean that brands have full access to that and kind of exploit that data, right? For example, a cool analogy in Web2 is if you want a list of everyone's email, technically you could go into any third-party data source and buy it on various sources and mass email people, but it's probably not the most effective method of reaching out to the right people. And, it's also maybe not most ethical to reach out to people that you never contacted before.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, like, just because data is on chain, doesn't mean you actually have access to it. You really need to work through all the consent and think about the value exchange, making sure you're getting the permission to use that data in a promising way so that it's actually useful to you and being transparent about it.
Yeah, I agree. Like, just very even personally speaking, I think ethics is incredibly important in this space. What's happening with folks right now with the stock market and crypto and things like that, especially our generation, I feel like they're trying to get rich really quickly. And Strike, Dogecoin and GameStop are examples of that, where some people made a lot of money and some people lost a lot of money that couldn't really afford to lose the money. And so I guess when I think about brands activating responsibly, I encourage brands to get in, build a foundation, invest in this innovation just to learn. But I do steer them away from like having a revenue stream for the sake of having a revenue stream. Just because you can sell NFTs for loads of money and make them exclusive for people that really can't afford them, I don't steer them in that direction. Like a Starbucks who already have the loyalty program and they've got that built-in behavior to maybe have an NFTs where they have a customized drink or something along those lines, like that makes sense for the brand, right? And it feels really personal.
Right. And I love that you mentioned like it's super important to be genuine about how you're entering this space,
Totally.
right? Like
Exactly.
for many people, for almost everyone, it's their first time. It's super important to be super transparent and genuine and really listen to that audience about what their needs are and hear them out. Like they'll provide feedback, and that's why you have new channels of engagement to get that direct feedback, like Telegram and Discord.
Totally.
It's really for the brand to put themselves out there and hear that feedback and get closer to their customers.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, great. And I guess, Jordan, as you're touching on encouraging brands to invest and get involved in this space, what are other things should they be thinking about in terms of just organizational change management to make sure that they're ready and considering all of the factors that go into investing in Web3?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll let Avanthika take most of this answer. I will say, you mentioned it before, Adidas is definitely a pioneer in this space. They are creating a Web3 team. They have a Web3 P&L. You know, they're hiring subject matter expertise, and they're having daily legal and finance battles, which I can imagine, like, it's a total change. And there's not that many people that understand the infrastructure. And I think, enter Salesforce to take a lot of those pains away and be that trusted partner.
I love this question, and I love that you shared like the Adidas example, right? I think it's super important for us to share more openly about like what other brands are going through. I feel like every brand right now, they're entering this for the first time. They're kind of in their own siloed environment where they're trying to figure this out and they don't know what other brands are doing. They think other brands haven't figured it out. And that's why they come to Salesforce, because Salesforce, we talk to so many different brands and we have that full perspective of what other brands are
Mm-hmm.
doing and can provide some of those best practices. So hearing what you said about Adidas, I'm like, wow, like I have those conversations with brands like every day. I guess my take on this, I'll highlight some points around treasury management, but also organizational management as a whole, because this is really both a continual and a cross-functional effort. So in terms of treasury and legal, as Jordan mentioned, you're going to be dealing with an entirely new P&L within your business when you start thinking about Web3. Brands will need to start accounting for a new type of asset, a new type of revenue stream. So the treasury team really needs to think about all of that and accounting for crypto on the books and the tax implications arising from holding this new
Mm-hmm.
asset. And then you also have to get your legal team involved. I know you pointed that out
Yeah.
too, right? How there's daily conversations between legal and treasury and even security. The legal team needs to think about the liabilities associated with owning a wallet, handling that crypto carefully, even deploying a contract on the chain, and that's permanent. That data is going to live on there forever and it's transparent. So those are definitely things to account for. I think secondly, on my point about this being a continual effort, most marketing teams and marketers, they're used to time-based efforts. Their campaigns just run as long as they have budget and can support it. In this case, this is not going to be something where if you run out of budget, you stop supporting it, right? The drop, as I said, is just the beginning. And now you've put something into market that's a new type of product that you've never created before. And that abides by a certain set of rules. And the NFT lives forever as long as the internet lives on the blockchain. And it's a real, shift in how you think about it. So you really need to ensure you're staffed correctly and have the resources to support and deliver utility in the future. And I guess my last point here is around the team. The team is just as important as the tech you're using, right? This is going to be a
Mm-hmm.
very cross-functional effort. As we said, legal, ethics, treasury, marketing, tech, all those different teams need to come together, really get aligned, and brands need to orchestrate all these teams since we can't just operate in silos for these types of initiatives. So it's highly critical that you have the team to support it, plan for measurement, plan for building business cases, and also make sure you're really measuring that return on investment and those KPIs for success. If a brand can do all of these, then eventually recurring revenue is a reality for the project and will make them super
Yes.
successful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for being here. I think this was a really great discussion, and I think it's only the beginning of having these types of discussions with brands and helping them
Should we
learn
high
more.
five?
So, yeah, high
Oh my
five.
God,
I
high
think I'm too
five.
far away, but let's try.
I can't
Oh
reach you.
no.
Be
I'm
careful.
using my
All
Windows.
right. Well,
Yeah.
we'll learn. We'll get used to it. But yeah, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for joining, and
Thanks.
Bye,
we'll
everyone.
see you
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye. Bye.